Yo, okay, I have just spent half an hour recording this video with no sound, so that's fun. Before we continue, give us a little subscribe, just to kind of make me feel better about the fact that I'm doing this twice. But we are going to carry on looking at this can website that I built using these 3D cans here. Blah, blah, blah. I'm going to put this whole thing up on my Patreon, by the way, so you can just have the whole template. But today, specifically, I'm going to look at the question I get asked the most, which is how do you export a 3D model from Blender and import it into a React 3 Fiber environment? Now, you can do this with vanilla 3JS, but the process would be different, and I'm not going to go into that today, but you can use like GLB loaders in 3JS. That's totally doable. But I will be using a package called GLTFJSX, which specifically is for node-based environments. So that is why we're going to look at it being for R3F. So is there anything else I need to say? I guess not. Okay, this is where we got to pretty much on the last tutorial. We've got a box. This is using GSAP. It spins around and moves, and today we're going to replace this with a can model. So let's get into this with Blender. Got some cold coffee today. Not really by choice, it's just gone cold. Okay, so we've got a can model here. Now, I'll be honest with you, I just found this online. I use like Sketchfab or CG Trader or occasionally Turbo Squid for 3D models. I mostly make my own models these days, but cans are like 2 a penny, so it didn't really make sense to be making a can when you can just get one nice and easy. So we are in edit mode. There are a few things then you need to think about before exporting your models to use in your 3D environment in your website. It's basically just a bit of housekeeping and keeping things tidy. So first of all, we don't need this cylinder here, right? That's just going to get in the way. But if you just did that and then you apply it and then you did a bake, you're probably going to run into some problems only if you're doing like a cycles bake. So let's say we're baking lighting, which is where you set up all the lights in your scene and you want to get all the shadows and the way the light is cast on the scene. You want to bake all that into a texture. You would use a cycles bake. If you just hid your cylinder, because it's not hidden in the render view, it would still cast a shadow on that. And there's been times when I have got my scene exactly how I want it, hit bake, and then I've come out with these massive black marks and smudges all over the object. And it's because I haven't hidden it in the render view, or actually if we don't need it, then we may as well just fuck him off like that entirely. So I guess the first step is just make sure that everything in your scene is only what you need in the scene, because it will render anything that's colliding with an object, it will render that as a big black smudge on the object as well. So as a shadow, should I say, is the technical term. So once your scene is tidy, the first thing you're going to want to do is make sure your geometry is optimized. So the geometry on this is actually pretty decent. There's not too many vertices, it looks nice and tidy, there's no drama there. But sometimes, especially around curved edges like this, you might just find zillions of vertices and it just becomes very messy. So the first thing you're going to want to do is, there's actually a subdivision modifier on this. Let's take that off for now. We don't really need it. The first thing that you would do is decimate anything that you don't need. And I tend to apply decimate until it looks shit. That is still passable. If you went down to I mean, nah. I was like, even that's kind of sound, but it's not. You could probably get away with like 0.8, I reckon, on this. But to be honest, like in this situation, you don't really see much of the top of the can anyway, and when you do, it's kind of spinning. So you can even get away with a little less quality on the top there, as long as the side is intact. So decimate modifier. Instead of applying, what I tend to do is like when you export, you would go material, no, mesh, and just make sure you're applying your modifiers there on the way out. Cool. Anything that's not going to be in view, like obviously we're spinning this can around, but let's say you're doing like a building and you're never going to see the back of the building, then just like select it and like fuck it off. It doesn't need to be there. Do you know what I mean? Like just save yourself the view, like save yourself vertices if you don't need them. Anyway, let's put that back in. We also don't really need the decimate on this, so I'm just going to revert that. But that's kind of my first step, is optimize the geometry, make sure that it's like all right for web. The next step then is we're going to look at UVs. So if we go to the UV editor, I've actually like worked on these UVs already and made sure that they're all kind of nice and uniform, and they fill up the whole texture space. Now, let me show you. The normal process would be like you select everything, you hit U, and then you go unwrap, right? And it gives you something like this for no real reason. It's all squashed over there. Now, let's say this is like a 2K texture. This bit here is all just going to render out as black. It's just wasted space, wasted resolution. So in this case, I would probably scale that, like, not that way, but like, why is it doing that? Oh, okay, idiot. Something like that. You know, tidy it up a bit, and you can see how all of a sudden, like, you're just going to get way more resolution on this bit here, which is where it matters, because that's kind of where the label is going to go on these bits. I decided that I didn't even need to render out any texture on the top and bottom. So I think in the end, I just went with like the label, literally just that. And then your other UV unwrapping method is Smart Project. I think I preferred this one a little better because it all came out nice and straight like that. So there was no kind of chance of it just being warped. But yeah, you want to play around with your UV map to get it nice, get it filling as much space as possible. The bits that don't need as much resolution, you can make smaller. The bits that really do, like this part of the label, is going to need the most resolution. Make them bigger than the bits that don't really need that high detail. You tend to find this particularly in building models where like the floor takes up like 2/3 of the UV map, and then you've got like these shelves with loads of detail on it. They're just like in the corner down there or something. So just make sure that your UV map is going to give you the most amount of quality that you can get out of it. When you're happy with your UV map, and I'll tell you why you do this in a sec, I go over to data and I make a new UV map and I call it Simple Bake, exactly like that, capital S, capital B, just so you know. You add it like that, I double click it, Simple Bake, blah, easy. Put it back to how it was. I'll tell you why in a second. I guess the only other thing to look at then is how you would apply the texture. I'm not really going to go into like texturing things, but it's pretty straightforward. To add like, you know, we could do that instead. Just change it up a bit. This is a plugin called Polygon with 2 eyes. It's got a bunch of free textures and a heap of premium textures on there as well. Okay, so the geometry is good, the UV map looks good, and we've created our own UV map called Simple Bake. Let's look at baking those textures. So I use a plugin called Simple Bake. It has saved me days, weeks maybe of my life. I think it's like $10 or $20. worth every single penny. It just makes baking super simple. Now, there's two ways you can bake. You can do PBR bake, which is what we're going to do. But you can also do a cycles bake, which is if you wanted to bake in lighting. Say you've got a scene. Let me show you this. I shouldn't show you this, but I'm going to anyway. Say you've got a scene like this. Yeah, well, I've got like these kind of light shafts on the side. You've got like some really intricate shadowing like in the corners and the top and up there. If we go into this room, you've got like the nice shadowing up here. This kind of stuff is hard to achieve in Three.js without heavy post-processing. And so an easier way to do it, because like in this instance, the lighting isn't going to change because it's just not, we would bake that lighting, which means you set up all the sunshine and lights and everything in your scene. There's like a little spotlight on the wall here that's baked in. You can kind of see it around there. You set it all up in Blender, and then we're going to capture all of that light information and like render it out as a texture along with everything else, like the texture on the floor, and I don't think there is anything on the walls actually, but in this case we're not going to do that because for this can we don't need all that light information. But that's, if you were going to need to capture light information, then you would go with a cycles bake. However, we don't need that. We just need PBR, which is just the kind of the color information. So we're going to use diffuse. We add it here. Let's be good peoples and call it what it is. Let's call it a can. Select your can, click add. Boom, that's in. We're going to use diffuse only for this. If you've got like more complex models, say like maybe a car model or something, you might want to do like your roughness map as well. Maybe a normal map if you've got something like, you know, sandy ground or like concrete walls or something. You can add all of those in as different textures. But for this, the roughness is really uniform, so we don't really need to piss around with loads of different maps. Baking resolution here. So normally what I do for production is bake at 4K, reduce down to 2K, get all the detail, and then squash the file size a little bit like that. For this, so that we don't long out the video, I'm just going to go with 1K. This is also a good tip if you're just like testing things out, seeing how it's like seeing if it works and seeing if it looks good, because, you know, rendering can take ages. It's just better to like render low quality, make sure that there's no problems, and then if you're sound, then, you know, whap up the quality. We'll stick at 1K for now. Multiple objects to one texture set. This is, I don't really use it actually, but let's say you had like, I don't know, a group of buildings, then you could select like 4 or 5 or 10 or however many buildings and render them all on one UV sheet. The reason I don't really use that is because we've taken the time to make our own UVs, make sure that they're all like how we want them and optimized. So I don't really piss around with that, to be honest. Export settings, let's put that somewhere where we're going to actually use it, like in the folder. I'm just showing you my whole hard drive of everything. Let's put it in the images folder there. But that was the images folder of our project. Excuse me, need some of my cold coffee. What's next? Can ignore. This is the main player here. Prefer existing UVs called Simple Bake. So clicking this on will take the UV which we have like spent time over crafting and making perfect, and it will make sure that it uses that for all of the bake settings. So that's really important to select that one. And then the other main player is this guy, copy objects and apply bakes. It's going to make a copy of can, which will then leave our original intact and apply the bake to that. So just keeps like your original safe. Pretty sure that's everything we need. So let's hit bake on that, see how we go. Nice and quick. Cool. So what it's done here, we've got our can, which is our original object. It's now hidden, and we've got can baked here with our baked texture. There's a little bug in it here. I don't know why there's a little white strip, pink strip there. Don't know why I called it white either. But for the purpose of this video, I'm not going to worry about it too much. Obviously for production, we'd need to sort that out. It's probably just a UV that's not quite right, probably. Anyway, I'm not going to get tempted to sort that out right now. I can live with it for the purpose of this video. So quick recap, we have made sure our geometry is optimized. We've made sure that our UVs are optimized, and we have then baked the texture onto this can. And we've got the new can baked model. So let's export this. Export GLB. Let's put it in our project. Once again, showing everything on my hard drive. Public models. Let's put it in there, and we're going to call it can. This is from the previous video that I did. Some settings to remember that are really important. Remember, export settings is going to save you a lot of time, so just make sure that is checked. Include selected objects is what we want. Data, material, we're not going to export. We're going to handle the material separately. It will just give us a lot more flexibility in the future. So we keep them separate. Mesh, we're going to apply modifiers. We only need UVs and normals, and that's it. And then compression. So Blender uses Draco compression, which is like the good stuff for GLB models. So we're going to apply some compression. What I normally do is just knock these down a couple, like that, and see how we go. So if we export that and see how we're looking, let's find it first of all. Models can, okay, 18 kilobytes. What I tend to do is just go to GLTF viewer, drag it in there, and there we go, we've got our can. Now, 18 kilobytes isn't really, problematic, but if we wanted to, we could apply more compression, really bottom them out like that. That takes us down to 13 kilobytes. We can see how that looks. I mean, it looks fine, to be honest. So we could stick with the 13 kilobytes for now and see how we get on. A bit more coffee. The coffee is finished. Okay. Let's crack on. So we've exported our model. Did we bake our image? I am now confused with, yeah, we did. We baked our image. Oh yeah, and we baked it into our images folder here. Basically just the texture. 1.5 megabytes is more than I would want it to be. Probably the first port of call for me would be to go to tiny PNG. Give it one of those, give it the once over. 706 kilobytes is probably still too much for me, to be honest. So what I would actually do is, that's a nice swimming pool. You could just export that as a JPEG, to be honest. Will it put it in the same place? No, of course it doesn't. God, really giving you a glimpse into my organization here. Images. Right, so we'll save that as a JPEG. How are we looking on file size? I mean, 255, you could whap that through tiny PNG as well if you wanted. In reality, what I'd actually do is just convert this to a format called KTX2, which runs on the GPU, so it's better, and generally speaking, just squashes the format. 122 kilobytes, like let's just live with that, whatever, it doesn't matter. This is not a video for file compression, but we'll run with that one anyway. So now we want to bring this into our code. Let me clear this and start a new terminal. Okay, so let's cd into our directory, because I'm using a subdirectory build for this. So we're in there. This is the guy that you want to use. So npx GLTFJSX, and we're going to use the latest of that. GLTFJSX is this. It comes with these commands, and it basically, I mean, its primary function that I use it for is to create like a code component of your model, which you can then just use in your project. But it comes with a heap of useful things like transform, which kind of does what the compression does coming out of Blender. So if you're using compression, you don't really need to use the transform function. One of the downsides of transform that I've found is that it can mess up your UVs. So if you wanted to apply a shader or like a texture to it afterwards, then you could get some like janky results from that. But if you've got your texture already applied to the GLB model, or it's just a flat color, then using transform can cut like 90% of the file size. But it uses Draco compression, which is the same as what Blender uses. So generally speaking, you can get the same or close enough results coming out of Blender, is what I found. Anyway, here's how I use it. So GLTFJSX latest, public /models/can.glb. Hit that, and it is going to create in our root directory can.jsx. Now, first thing you'll notice is that this here is wrong. That should be in models, should also be models. And I don't want to call it model, I want to call it can, like that. I'm going to copy all of this, and I'm going to create my own file within my own like little project structure here. I preface everything with model, if it's a model, obviously, and we'll put it in there. So now we're working with model can.jsx. We can get rid of that, it doesn't matter. What do we need to think about with this then? Not really anything. We can just bring it into our main scene. So if we go back to this where we've got the box, our box is here. We can now just get rid of that and bring in can. There he is. So working fine. We now need to look at how we're going to get the texture on that. So let's go back to model can. I'm going to use texture from dry. It's just nice and convenient. We're going to make constant use texture, and then we're going to want to reference where the texture is, which is in images, and we'll use the JPEG one and see how the quality holds up. There we go. So we've got our texture there. Now, I'll tell you this before we do anything else. Sometimes when you map a texture, so we're going to do this, right? We're going to do mesh standard material. Like that, we're going to map the texture to it. That's all we really need to do at this stage, and then we'll close the mesh like that. Sometimes when you map a texture in 3, and honestly, it doesn't seem to be all the time, it just seems to be sometimes, it can flip the wrong way. If that is the case, if it just kind of looks a bit janky from the start, well, actually, let's just see how it looks. Yeah, okay, so you can see how it's like all lines and stuff like that. It's so the texture isn't mapping properly. So sometimes you've got to flip the texture, so we can do that with a use effect just before anything else happens. What are we going to do? Text.flip y. Set that to false, and then we're going to need to update that. God, my fingers are like sausages mashing the keyboard today. Needs update. There you go. So we can flip the texture, and that should solve the issue of the janky texture. I didn't import use effect because I'm a pro. Still junky Y. So that's our baked model. Okay, so so it's still looking a bit janky. The only reason I can think of that would be looking jank, I mean, let's just take this off. See if that changes. No, but you can see that it did flip. The only reason I can think of is we applied quite a lot of compression coming out of Blender. So let's tweak those compression settings. We don't need it to be like 13 kilobytes, so we can always just be a bit more. I guess text coordinates are probably the thing that we don't want to spank a load of compression on. Let's try something like that. Comes out at 16 kilobytes. I mean, no one's going to cry over that, to be fair. Let's refresh. Hey, there we go. Cool. So, I mean, we've now got quite a low quality JPEG file, which you couldn't even, like, you can't really tell that that's low quality, especially if we like whap a bit of roughness on there. And a bit of like metalness. There, I mean, you couldn't even tell that texture is like 100 kilobytes. Something like that. And that's kind of dope. So that is how I would get my models out of Blender and start using it in my 3D scene. And then what's cool is you've then got that as just like a component, you know, it's just called can. So if you wanted to in your main scene, you could then just like, you know, whap another can in there if you wanted to. I don't know why you would. Well, we are going to at some point. I'll put like 5 cans in here. But we are going to like... Well, actually, no, we may as well do this properly. Like... Can 2. So that's exactly the same. Initial position might be a problem. And also we haven't put any can 2 stuff in there. We would just do the same exact thing, but instead of using like can 1, obviously we'd use can 2. Let me find the stuff that I used in the Marcelo actual thingy. It's in here. Here we go, can 2 animations. So let's just take those. We'll put them into ours with any joy. There we go. Yeah, I mean, the initial position is off. We probably have to separate those out, but we want to put an intro animation on this anyway, so I'll do that in the next video. But yeah, for now we have like successfully made the geometry nice and small. We've exported to like a reasonable file size. We've got a texture which we can use independent of the model, which is going to be good for like feeding into a shader, which will allow us to have this sort of effect. So yeah, that's the end of that. Okay, see you.